Hello and welcome to my very first video on YouTube. My name is Elias, I'm 29 years old and I work as a project manager in the consulting team. One of my daily tasks include the Power Platform from Microsoft. Whoever doesn't know the Power Platform, it is made out of four main components. First one is Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, and Power Virtual Agents. Power Apps is used for application development using low code, also no code development for simple to complex applications. The second one is Power Automate. As the name also says, it is used for automating workflows, automating processes, moving data from A to B, and for example, notifying people, and much more. Power BI is a data analytics tool. You can connect multiple data sets to Power BI and analyze data, manipulate the data, and then create a dashboard to present it. Last but not least, the newest entry to the Power Platform family, Power Virtual Agents, where you can create chatbots to help your team or your customers with a 24/7 chatbot and embed it into your website or in Microsoft Teams or anywhere else you might need it. Today we will see an example or a real life example in using SharePoint and Power Automate. Let's imagine the scenario where we are a company and we receive new projects every day. We want to track those projects in a SharePoint list so that it's in the cloud, everybody has access to it, it's 24/7 there, and so on, and it's also secure. And we are the management team. So sales brings in a new project, saves it in a SharePoint list, and the management team has to assign a project manager to the new project. So in our scenario, we will have a meeting once a week where we assign the project to the project managers. So we need a SharePoint list to track the incoming projects, and then another SharePoint list where we track the projects that have been handed over to the project managers. So we need two SharePoint lists, and to allow the so we need two SharePoint lists and the Power Automate in between to move the data from the first SharePoint list to the second one and notify the project manager when the project has been assigned to him. For that, we will jump to SharePoint and create the list first. So new list, blank list, and we will name this handover tracker. Click on create. As you can see, when you create a new SharePoint list, you get the first column called title. You can either remove it, hide it, but you can also rename it. In our case, we will rename it to project name. And we will create a couple more columns. Let's call the next one customer name. Customer code. And project manager. That will be a person column because we want to search for the name and we don't want to manually enter the name of the project manager. There is a reason for that. We'll see it in Power Automate. So we can call this PM. And last but not least, we need to track the status of that project. So let's say we need a choice column, and let's say we have two options. Let's rename this status for now. We have two options. One will be pending, and the other one will be approved. We can select a default value. In this case, that can be pending. That means every time a new project comes into the project handover tracker, it will always be in pending until we change it. Okay, so the first list is ready. We can jump into site contents and create the list where the projects that have been handed over will be saved. Call that PMO for Project Management Office. Again, we have the title here, which we can oops, not that button, which we can rename to project name. Single line of text column, customer name. Then we want to create another one for the customer code. And one more, not yes, no, but a person's column named project manager. We don't need the status here since in this SharePoint list, only the handed over projects will be saved. Okay, so the structure is completed. Now we can jump to Power Automate and create our first flow. For that, we have to click on the plus button at the top left side of the screen, and we can see here different choices: automated, instant, scheduled. Automated flow is when Power Automate automatically is triggered every time a change happens. And for that, Power Automate looks the whole time into that SharePoint list when we link it. And every time something changes, Power Automate will be triggered. And if the changes that are done are the ones we want based on a criteria, then it will do something else. We will see that in a second. Instant cloud flows are when the user manually triggers the automation. For example, you're doing some modification in the data and then you want to transfer it in a backup list. You can put an automation together and manually trigger that way. And scheduled is when an automation will run once a week, once a month to, for example, create a report based on a data amount. So we will create an automated flow, give it a name, let's say handover tracker to PMO, PMO, PMO. So we have here a bunch of options, and what we are going to use is when an item is created or modified. There's a reason for that. As we said, if you go back to the handover tracker, project will be coming in, let's say every day, but the meeting with the management team where the projects will be handed over is once a week. And for that reason, we want Power Automate to be able to get triggered even for the items that have already been created. If we choose when an item is created, is a one-time trigger. So you create something and then it doesn't look anymore inside that SharePoint list. But we don't want that because when the project will be created, it might not have the PM yet. It might be in the pending status yet or something else. So when we create a project, we might change stuff and we want Power Automate to be triggered also when we change stuff. For that reason, we will be using when an item is created or modified. Click on create. So next we have to choose our site address, in this case, this one, and the list name. We can see here handover tracker and PMO. We want handover tracker. That's our trigger. Next step will be the condition. So when I create a condition that looks into the handover tracker item that was created in the handover tracker, and if the status is equal approved, then we want to move it to PMO and notify the project manager. But if that's not the case, the managers, they can change here everything they want and the automation will not be triggered. That's why we use when an item is created or modified. So we select condition. We choose then the value of that condition, which is status. Oops, not there. What it here? Status. And as you can see, status value. Not the status because the status is just a name. We want the value that's inside that dropdown. So if status value is equal to approved, then we go down this lane because that's then true. Add an action. Search for SharePoint. So that we go to the SharePoint category. And now we can see here triggers and actions. Since we already have a trigger, we then have to have an action. You cannot have a trigger after a trigger. But you can have multiple actions. In our case, we want to get that item. Because this trigger here only looks into the SharePoint list and sees if the changes have happened and something has been modified or created. It then goes into the condition, but then it does nothing else. So we want that if the condition is true, to go one more time into that item that triggered the automation and get all the information available for that item. That's why we search for a get item action. Select the site again, that one, and the SharePoint list, which is handover tracker. And this is important. We need to put the ID of that item that triggered the automation. And if you click on the ID field here, you will see the ID dynamic content, list item ID. Next, we want to, now we have the item and the information, we want to create it into PMO. So we search for create an item. Create item, which is again another action. We can have multiple actions. Select the SharePoint site and the SharePoint list, in this case PMO. And we'll see here it will populate the columns that we have in our PMO SharePoint list. For title, the title is our project name. The reason why it says title is because when you create a new SharePoint list, you always get title first, and the column is created. So when a column is created, that name is fixed in the back end, so you cannot change that anymore. For that reason, it may say here project name, but in the back end, this column is still called title, and Power Automate looks at the back end. It doesn't look at the front end, what you see. You can see that very well if you go to settings, list settings, and then here are our columns. If you click at here, it says title. If you click on that, you will see here at the end of URL field equals title. Let's see another one that we created. For example, customer name. Customer name is called customer name because we created that from scratch with the name customer name. And this won't change. And this is what Power Automate sees. So let's go back to handover tracker and to our flow. So for title, we need then title. So don't get confused because of that. It will still be calling the project name column. Doesn't matter how it's called in the backend. You want to see here the project name, and that's what you're going to see. For customer name, we can search for customer name, project customer code as well. And now PM claims. As I mentioned before, when you use a choice, not a choice column, a person's column in SharePoint, that works as a lookup column. That means it looks somewhere else for that name and relates itself then to that place or to that table. Imagine as a different table. So when you select, for example, Ilias in SharePoint with a persons column, that creates a relationship to another table, which you cannot see, where all the information around me is stored. My email address, my full name, my display picture, profile picture, my department, job title, and so on and so forth. That's why in Power Automate, when you select PM, you can see here it brings a little bit more information than it used to do for customer name. It brings PM claims, display name, email, picture, and so on. In this case, we need display name because we want to store the name of the project manager. And last action would be to send an email notification to the project manager that a project has been assigned to him. So search for that, send an email notification. Here, we can also use dynamic content. So to who? to the PM. But not the display name, we need his email address. That's the awesome part of using a persons column and not just a single line text. Otherwise, we will only have the name, and we then had to use that name to somehow find the email address. It is doable, but very complicated. And this way, we make sure that the name is always written right, because the person who creates a SharePoint entry doesn't have to write the name. He just has to search for the name and select it. So here we need the PM email address. For subject, we can write project and then use some dynamic content around the project name, which is title. Project XYZ has been assigned to you. And in the body, we can use a little bit more. Let's say, dear project manager name, again, comma, space, enter. A new project has been assigned to you. Details below. And we can use here project name. It's again title. And we can send him the customer name. Customer name. We can send the customer code. We don't need to send him his own name. I think he knows that until now. But the link, we can send him a link to the item. That way he or she doesn't have to search link to item. And then a nice thank you. Thank you, PMO automation. Okay, this is finished now. Let's save it and make sure it is in test mode. Manually, test flow, test. Okay, so now the automation is waiting for a trigger. So now we can jump back to our handover tracker SharePoint list and create a new item. Let's say our Samsung is our Samsung user adoption. It's our project. Customer name, Samsung. Customer code, D1234. Project manager is myself. And we will leave it at pending. So now it's a sales team bringing the project in. Click on save. And let's see what happens here. If everything goes right, it should work, but it should not create a copy in the PMO SharePoint list. Okay, it looks like it worked. Click on condition. As you can see, the expression result is false because it's pending, and the condition was it's true only if it's approved. You can see here it did nothing. It's a cross. Now we are on that day where the meeting happens, and we are going to set the project into to approved. So let's go back, edit, put it in test mode, click on test. So now the automation will be waiting. Actually, you will not have to do this anytime. This is just for showing the demonstration purpose now. So we go back to the handover tracker. We see in the PMO, we have nothing. So we select the project, click on edit. We see, okay, everything hasn't changed. Maybe we wrote something wrong, and we'll say, okay, instead of D, we want to have S here for Samsung. And okay, this project can be handed over now. We click on approved, click on save. Now we can jump back to our automation and see what happens. Okay, your flow ran successfully. So if you now go to the condition, it says expression result true. And as we can see here, a green tick everywhere. It got that item, and then it created the item also in PMO. We can see that if we go to the PMO SharePoint list, and there it is. Also the change, newest version is in there. And here's much more information than we actually need now, but we can see at the bottom, send an email notification, it sent it to me, project Samsung user adoption, so it used the dynamic content, dear my name, a new project has been assigned to you, and here is the information, Samsung user adoption, the customer name, code, and the link. If we click on that, it should bring us right back to the PMO SharePoint list. Yeah. So the PM doesn't have to search for that list where it is, where's the project. Yeah, so that's it for this video. I hope you liked it, and if so, please give it a thumbs up. And yeah, I hope I gave you a rough idea of what Power Automate does and can do. Hopefully, this will encourage everybody to give it a try. And we can see each other then on the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.